Hey there YouTube, this is SJM4306 back with another video. I've been doing a lot of these. I think this is like my third one this month. Replacement batteries for these Sony I believe this is the model, let's see, NW-S205F. The last number, so will determine the capacity of the player. But yeah, basically this is the MP3 player that was featured in Persona 3, and so that's why there's a resurgence of popularity in these. They're getting expensive now, and people are digging these out of drawers only to find that the batteries are completely dead. This guy was circa, I want to say it was like 2005-ish something, so they're quite old now. Batteries are pretty tired, no longer working, obviously. And I'd repaired this one. I've done multiple videos on these, so I'm not going to show you battery swapping again. However, when I plugged it in after swapping the battery, the screen did not work. So the screen on these are early OLEDs. They do die out over time, and definitely with use, and especially if you keep them like humid areas or like high temperature areas, that'll accelerate it. Anyway, I've verified that the battery does charge and it does work, because if I plug in headphones, I can't see the menu or anything, but I can play music, and when I plug this in over USB, the drive pops up. So clearly, electronically, this works. It's just the display probably actually technically works. It's just so dim. Like the pixels themselves have like worn out so much that I cannot see it. If I turn down all the lights in absolute pitch darkness, it's kind of hard to tell, but there might be something going on. But basically, it's unusable in the state that it is. However, Sony did end up using a couple different models use the exact same display, and this is one of them. This is a Sony Bean. Under the guidance of the owner of this guy, I'm doing this as like a paid repair sort of thing. We were able to track down this Bean with a working display, and this guy was about, I want to say it was like 50 or 60 bucks. So not particularly cheap, but the only way to fix one of these, you can't buy new displays, is to pull them from old MP3 players that happen to use the same display. So I'm just going to turn off the light, the overhead light here, and turn this guy on, and you can see it looks decently bright. It looks a little dimmer in real life than to the camera here, but yeah, you can see it does work. This is a functioning display. I don't see like any major like burn-in. There's a little bit. There always will be, because of how it animates like a battery charging animation when you plug it into charge, and even after the battery fully charges, it leaves that up on the display really stupidly. So Sony kind of messed up on that, in my opinion. But there always will be some like burn-in on these types of displays, but this is actually pretty good. So we lucked out on this, especially given the price. But I'm going to take this display and stick it in the other player now. Let's get the lights back up. So yeah, there's also, I believe it's like the NW-E00X series also uses the same display. Those are more like a USB thumb drive style MP3 player that Sony released. Yeah, overall condition of this player is like not too bad. It's a bit grubby, but we only care about the display. So unfortunately, this is going to require us to dismantle this. So I'm going to set aside this player for now. We are going to extricate the screen from this specific model is affectionately named the Bean for very obvious reasons. It's a bean-shaped player. If you've never seen one of these, the USB socket usually jams on these. The mechanism isn't so great, but this one does eventually pop out, and that's how you charge and transfer data. And you pull the latch to retract the USB port. Anywho, let's just get into this, I guess. We are primarily interested in the display. Just so that you guys know, this is the original battery that was in that player, and it started swelling up a little bit. It's a little bit puffy, but it's not as bad as I've seen on other players that I fixed. You want to get them before the battery starts swelling, because they are a pain to open without damaging anything once that battery does swell. I'm realizing I'm going to have to grab like tweezers and screwdrivers and whatnot, so give me one sec. Okay, so you can download a service manual for this guy, which will tell you the steps to take it apart. I have one of these in black. I've taken apart multiple times. It's been so long, I don't really quite remember, so I guess I'm just going to kind of go through this. I happen to remember you do have to slightly heat up around this area to remove this adhesive holding this front screen bezel, and then there's extra screws there. There is one screw here, and actually two. There's one in the corner there. But you need to take this bezel off. So I'm going to set my hot air to the lowest temperature it'll go, which is 100. And I'm going to try to concentrate just around the outside. I'm going to try not to go over the actual display itself. And we're just going to want to peel this up. I can already kind of get a fingernail under here. So I'm just going to very lightly, not too close to the actual display itself, and just generally warm this up. This isn't hot enough, like I'm not burning my fingers or anything. So I'm just going to go through here, just warm up the adhesive, and then once I get it warm enough, if you have like a plastic pry tool, you can use that, or your fingernails should do it once you get the adhesive a little bit softened. So I'm going to do this for a little while, and we'll give it a try. Holding it a couple inches away, not directly on the screen. You don't want to damage. The OLED degrades with heat, so if you heat it up too much, you will damage it. But a little bit is fine. A hairdryer alternatively will work probably better, honestly, because they'll go down to a lower temperature. And I'm just going to try to get my fingernail there, and I can already see it starting to separate. The adhesive on these are pretty old, so they're not really super strong to begin with. There we go. Already got a corner up. And there we go. This was already pretty worn, so it's not in the best condition. Wait, what? Something just popped off. Ah, button. Okay. So the FM/display button popped off. I thought there was a silicone pad that they were adhered to, but maybe not. I guess they're just in there. So I'm not going to be reassembling this to like use it, because once you pull the display, I'm not going to be able to find another display, chances are. But yeah, I can just about see the display does still work clearly. It says no FM auto preset. And yeah, we'll I mean, can't really. I can put it into hold, and hopefully it just shuts off there. Yeah, the annoying thing about these players is there's no real off button. Like, you cannot manually force this player off. You can only put it into hold, and then it goes to sleep. So that's kind of an annoying design decision, but it's just the way that these work. You just kind of have to wait till they time out. Anywho, we could see 2 Phillips screws here. I think that's, and then these 2 screws, and I think that's kind of it. And then clips around the player. So I'm just gonna carefully remove these screws. And there is a little reset hole apparently in there. If you take some fine tweezers, you can get into that if you ever need to reset this player. I would probably, yeah, let's get that screw out. I would probably try and follow a service manual if this is your first time taking one of these apart, because they are pretty complex. But I'll figure it out. I've taken apart a couple of these in my day. Yeah, very annoyingly, USB is going to try to pop out now. I kind of got it open. I think that maybe there is a clip here. So try to use non-sharp tools, especially around the display now that the plastic lens is not protecting it. But should be able to kind of, yeah, I might need to grab something to pry, like a dull blade or something. Give me one sec. Okay, so I'm going to be pretty ginger about this. Yeah, there's a clip right here. Got the front half mostly off. This is a dull blade, so it's not really sharp anymore. I'm just using it as a pry tool. But I still want to be careful, don't slip or anything. I remember this was a bit of a pain. Yeah, okay, there's a track that once you start separating it, this can kind of lift off a little bit. And I believe there's a clip under here. I'm gonna make sure there's nothing around here to scratch the screen, but we need to get this clip off. There we go. And then now the top is off. There's some adhesive that was sticking this button between the two halves. That was easy enough to peel off. Sort of stuck here. You can sort of leave it with the bottom of the case. That cap just fully popped off now. It's just on like a sliding tracks all around. Actually, very interesting design. This cap can pull off now the button for like the play, pause, and volume and everything. It's just a 5-way button surface mount there, and it just sort of presses on, and it can come off with the bezel, and you just push this back on. It's just friction fit. So I'm just gonna stick that there. Let's see. There are more screws now that we have access to, now that we have this open more. There's one here, one here, one here, one here, and possibly some more. I kind of want to get to the point where I can disable the battery. Can't tell if it's swollen yet, but the connector for that appears to be right here. There's a little bit of Captain tape holding it on. So I'm just gonna try and lift that. Okay, there's some protective tape all around. Now, keep in mind this is all live still. The battery's still plugged in, so don't short anything if you can help it. Just gonna pull that back. Really don't like grabbing batteries by their cables, but I don't really have a point. I don't have an optional means right now, so I just sort of very carefully grabbed it away from any contacts and just gently pulled out. So now the battery is disconnected at least. So it's not active here. And let's just start taking out screws that we can see. Okay, we are going to want to be ginger around the display. There's a ribbon cable here for the like front switches that we can get access to. And yeah, I think we are going to have to start taking off. There's like a L ribbon cable that goes underneath that adhesive here, so I'm gonna have to lift that, unfortunately. The copper tape stays. I'm just gonna try to liberate the ribbon from the copper tape. Careful not to rip any of the ribbons. So I believe this is what goes to the USB cable. It like wraps all the way around and then snakes under and then plugs into another ZIF connector near the ribbon. There's a little bit of adhesive. Fortunately, the way that this wraps around, you can undo it if you get underneath the latch. But you can't reinstall it really from this position. You kind of have to do a very specific sequence of events because the latch is hidden. Oh, this piece of tape is now kind of in the way annoyingly. Okay, so yeah, the tape that was covering the battery attaches this ribbon. I'm just going to pull this up now. Okay. This board, I don't really... the LCD is still plugged in right. I'm just going to peel up the rest of this black tape. And that gives me access to the connector for the LCD. I'm going to lift the ZIF latch on that. Might also need to lift up on this tape There's a plastic and tape here to gain access to the latch. It's opposite. I was trying to lift up on the back. That's why it's good to use fingernails. You'll damage your fingernails before you damage the connector. The white part is what you lift on this specific type of connector. Then you could just pull that off. Be very careful with this ribbon. If you even nick it a little bit, if you break any single pin, the screen will stop working. This display, there's 4 wires soldered on from the bottom there. And I want to try getting the connector for the front switch off. There you go. So I can lift this board off because I don't want to have to desolder the 4 wires that's there. I believe this is fully disconnected now. Yeah, there's just a little bit of adhesive holding it down. So now we can swing this out of the way. And there's just 4 wires connecting it. The battery actually is pretty good on this, I think. It's not swollen, which is pretty surprising. But I do need to get this display out. Trying to remember how this display is attached. I think, yeah, you have to pull out the bottom. Okay, so there's a metal like cage behind the LCD, and it's being held in kind of by the metal cage that's screwed into the plastic base. I see one more screw that's available now just underneath the battery. Actually, I see 2. So I'm going to undo this one. Magnetized driver will make your life way easier. And then I'm going to undo this one. These are tiny screws, so be careful not to lose them. So there. Oh, and there's one last just to the right here at the top. Okay. So those are all out now. I don't think I see anything. It's sort of loose now. So I think I'm maybe going to be able to, okay. So that metal bracket that we just unscrewed is starting to come out. I think at some point it just sort of all pops out. Yeah, there you go. Just sort of wiggle it a little bit. The headphone jack is stuck in the hole there. So there you go. It has its own molding little piece. And that's it. Everything just sort of pops out. There's that USB connector that goes to this like L ribbon. And I'll try not to get fingerprints all over the display. I'm going to have to dust this off afterwards. The latching mechanism's pretty interesting. There's a way definitely of ejecting the USB there. I forget. There you go. There's a latch here. And it just sort of deploys and then locks into a second lock state, which you have to pull this lever here. You can see the ribbon's long enough that, and it's flexible enough that it can extend fully or retract. Gonna stop messing with that bit. The display now looks like is on this metal bracket, and gonna try to figure out. Okay, the ribbon wraps around the back of it, and it's stuck slightly to this ribbon. So now I remove the whole body. Just gonna set that aside. Actually, you can see that this is a flash chip. This is probably like the FM tuner chip. There's some RAM, and this is the main like DSP or whatever, the main IC there. You can see the clock crystal there. And yeah, so now we have the display. I'm gonna very gently remove the tape that's on the cable. Go nice and slow. There you go. The tape is off. The cable is still there. There's a little bit of So the chip on glass, it's actually not chip on glass, chip on flex. There's a silicon chip there, and that's the driver for the display. They put it in a really bad place. It's on the flex. If I pull by this ribbon, if I pull this straight up, because there's a little bit of adhesive there, it's going to break all the connections to the flex cable there. So I think the safest way is to very gently, with a dull flat tool, work at the adhesive, and just a little bit at a time. And I'm trying not to put any pressure. I'm going between the adhesive and the metal bracket, not on the other side where the chip is right on the other side of this ribbon. So I'm trying to stay away from the ribbon. And I'm just very small amounts scraping the adhesive off the metal and leaving it on the ribbon. And almost done. Sorry you can't see this. This is really difficult to do because I'm trying not to damage this ribbon at all, because you get one try basically. And if you damage it, then the whole display is gone. And they put quite a bit of adhesive on here. I'm almost all the way through. Okay. There. Oh, geez. Okay. So the adhesive is there. Now we just got to gingerly lift the LCD, which I really hope they probably adhesive that down too. It might be worth it to try to heat the back of this metal panel, soften adhesive, and then very carefully lift the LCD out. So I think that's going to be the play. They never intended this to be serviceable, at least by anyone outside of Sony. This was always intended to be installed once and then never touched again. The safest place, if you are going to pry, I wouldn't really pry if you can help it, but if you can get a small shim, is away from the ribbon. The ribbon's on the bottom. That's the danger zone. Really, either corner at the top, do not crack the glass, but basically use a soft thing like a plastic spudger or your fingernail. If you can kind of get between the metal and very lightly pry. Yeah, I can just about see the adhesive. I think I'm going to have to heat this more and do small steps at a time, and probably end up taking like a thin piece of like Mylar and sticking it down in between as I make my way through to keep it from sticking back down onto the metal. This is going to take probably like half an hour or something because I need to be super careful. So give me 1 sec. Oh my god. So they put a whole strip of adhesive here. Most of it came off. We have the display now. I don't really want to risk pulling this adhesive off the ribbon. It's like right underneath the glass chip on board, or well, it's not glass, it's silicon. I will very likely, it's chip on flex by the way, I'd very likely damage that trying to peel this one piece of adhesive. So if I can just leave that on there, ooh, Jesus. So if I can just leave that adhesive on there, I would prefer to do so. Unless if it obstructs me installing it into the new player. But I'm going to plug this back into the main board and then see if it still lights up. Because I just did a lot of work on it and I want to make sure I didn't destroy anything. Okay, so just to show you, it still works. The screen still works. Okay, let's get this all apart again. Screen still works. It's pretty much good to go now. That was pretty nerve-wracking, especially given replacements aren't really available at all now, and they are like stupid expensive for even like not high-end players like the Bean. That's sort of a mid-range player, if anything. This guy is much more valuable and more important. So, I'm just going to retake this apart. I've done 2 videos already on how to open these, so I'm going to do this guy off camera, get down to the LCD and then, or the OLED, sorry, and then we'll continue on with this. Okay, so we are back. There's 2 adhesive strips. One is shorter, and that's where the ribbon for the OLED is. The other one's longer. This one is a replacement battery. It's a little bit smaller than the original battery. We have the 2 pieces of tape here. I'm just going to remove the one from the top or bottom, however you're looking at this. The other one's on the ribbon. So even though this display is toast, I'm not trying to cause any damage to the ribbon if I can help it. But I want to reuse these pieces of tape because they do protect. So the displays on these, you can see this is more silver. They are a little bit different, so probably they're going to look slightly different once we get them in there. But you can see how the ribbon cable, this edge is the same as this edge with the white. It's just, it maybe appears that the display on this doesn't have a polarizing filter, but this does. I can see sort of a darker outer appearance. That might affect like maximum visibility, but as far as I can tell, I'm pretty sure these are almost identical other than that. There's a tape around the sides here. I'm just going to lift it on one side. And leave it attached on the other. There we go. And now the old display can sort of fold out. You can see here there's another piece of tape. This time they used a black piece of tape. Here they use Kapton tape. I'm going to leave that on there. There's no point messing around with that. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to swing the battery out. Actually, for this, I'm just going to disconnect the battery. Why am I trying to do this with the battery attached? I'm going to take that piece of tape off and very gingerly wiggle the battery off. So now the battery's off. I'm going to just remove it entirely so it's no longer a factor. Yeah, you could see new battery versus old battery. It might be actually a tiny bit longer too. That's interesting. Anywho, aren't too many companies that make replacement batteries for these anymore. It's pretty unfortunate. Okay, so there is a piece of tape holding the latch down, so I can't get to the latch without peeling that tape up. It's just a Kapton tape. Just going to get the side towards the body lifted. It's not strictly necessary for the display to work. I'm probably just going to leave it on the old one. And going to lift the latch. And then we can just slide this old screen off. There we go. So old screen, kind of more silver gold looking than the new one, but these are identical otherwise. Like I said, I think it's literally just the there's a extra polarizing filter for higher contrast on this screen, but it does cut the maximum brightness. Now this screen, I have to reinsert the ribbon, which is pretty fiddly to do because the socket is tiny. But once you get it seated, it'll feel right. And I'm going to lock this tab down. Might actually have to do it with a different tool. I'm trying to do this all, there we go, without having to remove this metal stud, like the mid-frame support sort of thing, because that's a pain to like get out and get back in. So the display sits, I have to remove these adhesive strips, sort of like this. I'm going to clean off all the fingerprints afterwards, but yeah, and then it sort of wraps the rest of the ribbon that's like exposed wraps under there. So I'm going to stick down the electrical tape onto the new display. It's aligned. It's like that. And then we got this tape that'll kind of hold that side down. And we've got this part of the tape, which then goes around here and then latches to there. So that looks pretty good. I am going to clean this. Probably going to get more fingerprints on it before long, but right before we slide it into the case, I'm going to clean it real well. Okay, so it's plugged in. I should be able to just plug in this battery and then do a quick test now to see if it still works. Please, God. Working on these, there's never any guarantees. They're so old and they're really not designed to be serviced at all. Like, they're really user unfriendly, if I'm being honest. Even though Sony does a really good job with their service manuals, it's just like the design of it is not really designed to be nice to work on. Let me shut off the light, and I believe this should just turn on now, maybe? I might have to, because I unplugged the battery, I might have to plug it in real quick to just give it a shot of juice to reset the protection circuitry in the battery. Okay, so I plugged it in for a second, and low battery came up. That screen. So the screen still works. Thank God. So I'm obviously going to have to charge it. When I installed this battery, I just plugged it in quickly to test it out, and I didn't really let it charge, and this was probably sitting on a shelf somewhere for a little while. So I definitely am going to want to recharge this better when I have this fully assembled, though. I'm going to put the piece of tape on to protect the battery connections. Make sure the wires are at least somewhat out of the way. When we go to slide this together, the tape can go back on like that. Okay, so we are in the home stretch now. The display does work. That is really good. I'm going to clean this real quick. Should be good enough. Try not to touch the display anymore. And holding the ribbons out of the way so that they don't catch on the metal, because that would be a horrible way to do all this work and then kill the display by like cracking the glass or something while you're reinserting it. I might have to do this bit off screen so I don't slip and make a mistake. I'm really sorry. I wanted to show like every single step, but this is so damn fiddly that I'm going to have to do this off screen to make sure I can get this slid in without damaging anything. Give me one sec. Okay, so I slid it in. I'm just going to take something that's not like super sharp that'll fit, and here, a little screwdriver. Press the button. Still, the display still works. That's definitely a good sign. And so now we pretty much go in reverse. I guess I'm just gonna speed through this. Now pretty much the danger part of this repair is over. Now we're just reassembling, and I'm gonna give this a nice big charge and test this as well. So let's get screwing. Just a quick note, I'd like to stop at this point in time. The adhesive, I'm reusing the original adhesive strips on these, so I am going to have to heat this up a little bit to like rebond this really well. I just stuck it together by hand. That's probably good enough, but a little heat never hurts. Just a little bit around the edges, though. You don't want to melt anything or damage anything. And after a couple seconds of this, I'm just going to give it a good squeeze, not too tight, not too hard, just to set that adhesive back up again. Just, yeah, good squeeze. And while I'm at it, make sure the buttons still align and work. Yeah, I can see the screen still works. It is very dim with my massive, like, 5 million lux overhead lighting, but it still works. We'll test this after I'm done without such bright overhead lights. I think we are basically done. And when I turn this on, it says low battery. So I'm going to give this a charge. and I'm gonna actually let this fully charge because I installed the battery in this and I didn't really properly charge test it because I couldn't, because there was no display. But now that there is a working display, let me give this a charge, and then I guess we'll play around with this for a little bit to make sure that it continues working fine. And also we'll look at how that screen looks. Annoyingly, this model, the window, I believe all the models kind of in this range, they tint the window a little bit, so the display will always look dimmer through this window than if you were just looking at the bare display. And I guess that's why they omitted the polarizing filter here, is because they're using the window as that sort of that tinting. Okay, don't want this video to drag on too long, but I charged it up, fully charged, and you can turn this on. You could see there is quite a bit of burn-in on the display, and because the lens is tinted on this player, it is not as bright as it looked like on the Bean MP3 player. The lens for the Bean was clear, so it had a separate polarizing filter on top of the display to increase contrast at the cost of some of the brightness, but because this is already tinted, it basically has like 2 levels of tint to this. It would be possible for me to open this up, remove the display, and then using a razor blade cut the polarizing filter off of the display, and that would definitely increase brightness. However, the risk of damaging that display because of how fragile it is would be pretty high. So I don't think it's really worth it just to get a little bit more brightness. It wouldn't massively increase the brightness, honestly. But yeah, you could see on the hold screen, like the battery icon from the old player is still there. You can see something about USB, like I guess that's a charging screen or whatever. That's all still there. There's nothing you can do about that. That's just the way it is. This is at least usable now. I can go into the menu, and you can actually go through and use the features. Unfortunately, pretty much all these displays are going to have some imperfections by this point in time, unless if you got so lucky that you got one that was like in pristine condition and like never used. They're all going to have issues with either brightness or like burn-in from just being used. But yeah, it's technically usable. It is working. Kind of did the best I could, unfortunately. It's just sort of a lottery when you buy used players, whether their screens will be any good or not. And it certainly doesn't help that this is a tinted lens. If the lens weren't tinted, it would be, I'm not going to say like massively brighter, but definitely noticeably brighter. The tint on these lenses decreases the use. If I had an easier way of removing the polarizing filter that's built into the display itself without damaging the display, then that would help as well. But like I said, I think that's too risky. I'm gonna send an email out to the owner, and if he wants to risk it, then I guess I would be up for it. But I would honestly highly suggest not taking that risk because of how rare these screens are, and basically you have to buy a new one if you mess up, because there's like no way to actually repair them once you damage them, unfortunately. Anywho, I want to make a quick video at least showing that I was able to resurrect this one player with a new screen. I'll put this video up for like posterity if anyone's interested. If you happen to have a player that uses the same display, it is possible to swap them. It is extremely difficult though. So yeah, definitely like practice on something else first, I would advise. Anyway, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.